Welcome to Occam's Razor, where we play fast and loose and get to the truth. Last night we had our first federal leaders debate in French, which I listened to, en français. I was quite amazed to hear Mark Carney make excuses for being unable to properly deal with the US tariff issue by saying, I've only been in the job 1 month. Good God, man. When you ask for a job, you need to be ready to go. It's not a job that you can walk into and learn as you go. But then again, you haven't been a politician at all and you haven't done any public service. So then why would you know how Parliament works other than whispering into Trudeau's ear for the past 5 years to ensure that your Brookfield company got all the best contracts and deals for our taxpayer money? Topics too scary for the federal uniparty debates to discuss. Let's get going. COVID-19 vaccine injuries and deaths, abandoning all who were coerced to take it to keep their job, denying it as work-related, and denying duty of care to Canadian Armed Forces members, which I've covered in prior videos. That's right, not one speck of discussion will be done regarding the COVIDity stupidity or the mandates at all. None whatsoever. They're going to keep that on the down low and hope that everybody forgets because, as you know, there are cases still in courts where they are going after peaceful protesters. And God forbid that a conservative party leader should actually answer questions regarding all the harms and injuries that have been done with the jib jab. Immigration and funding newcomers. We know that immigration has stressed every social system. We've inundated the country with so many immigrants that we just can't keep up in every single sector. There's not enough houses. There's not enough doctors. There's just not enough hospital spots. And funding newcomers. Did you know that the Liberal Party actually went overseas looking for people to bring into the country, actually headhunting, going to people and saying, hey, come on over. We're going to pay you. We're going to give you enough money to live on for the first 2 years. And by then, hopefully, you'll become a citizen and we can get you a job. But don't worry, just come on down. We'll give you all kinds of money. That's right. They gave them all kinds of money while our Canadian citizens are skipping meals, going to food banks, living in tent shelters across country. Never seen anything like it in my 60 years of life. This country has gone to hell in a handbasket. But meanwhile, this Liberal government has borrowed and printed money like there's no tomorrow, like drunken sailors on meth, so they can give money to non-Canadian citizens to replace the actual citizens. We know what they're doing. PPC candidate Megan Murphy's Liberal freezing her bank account in the middle of an election. Yes, we saw that yesterday when we talked about it, and other channels are talking it as well. Do you think there's going to be one mention about frozen bank accounts during the debate tonight? I highly doubt it. Fake Indigenous graves hoax. That's right. Huh. It was quite interesting to see Rosemary Barton of the CBC clutching her pearls at Rebel News reporters asking questions and then immediately dismissing them as fake news, misinformation, disinformation, and all that. Yes, it is a fake Indigenous graves hoax because habeas corpus, show me the body. There has not been one single body found. In fact, some of the graves that were found were known to be pre-existing graves. So we know that the bodies that are there are accounted for while we have voids under the soil that they're looking at and saying, there's a body there, it's mass graves. No, dig it up. This whole hoax has been dividing the nation, and churches have been put to the torch, and nobody cares. Nobody says anything about it because Christians are the number one target group in Canada for hate crimes. Brutal police state tactics against journalists and peaceful protesters while ignoring violent pro-terrorist supporters and street public space blockades. Well, we just saw, again, Natasha Graham being assaulted by the Montreal police, who went up and physically assaulted her so that they could get a reaction out of her and then assault her again and put her under arrest. But these brutal police state tactics all started under the Liberal government when they couldn't stand the fact that the freedom protest was able to fund itself rather quickly. When they decided to raise some money, they raised $10 million in a couple of days. The Liberals were gobsmacked. They can't even raise $10 million in 1 year, let alone a couple of days. So they knew the support that the Freedom Convoy had to be stopped. So they got people to, whoever was funding the money, they got that side to take the money away from them. So then within a couple of days, they raised another $10 million. Well, they couldn't have any of that. And that is why they enacted the Emergencies Act and brutally, violently shut down a protest, which, if you don't remember, the courts have ruled that the enactment of the Emergencies Act was illegal. So this Liberal government has no compunctions at all about using violence to get their way because that is how the far left does it. We have pro-terrorist supporters throughout our streets and in public areas blocking it off, doing the Medouane or the Adan almost every day, blocking the streets. Can you imagine if the Lutherans decided to block a street in downtown Toronto to hold mass? Do you think that people would stand for that? Then why are we standing for these things? And then when people question it, the police don't deal with the people that are actually blocking the streets. They intimidate and push around the people that start asking the questions. This is out of control. But they're not going to talk about that tonight. I highly doubt it. Mark Carney's connections to Epstein through Ghislaine Maxwell and wife's sister's garden party and wife's sister's name in the black book. That's right. So we've seen pictures around the internet of Mark Carney and Ghislaine Maxwell and Mark Carney's wife attending some outdoor event. This has been found to be at her sister's estate in England, where there was a garden party. That's where the picture was taken. And if you look it up online, you will find Carney's wife's and his wife's sister's name in Carney's Black Book, which has been published online. But is anybody going to ask any questions about that tonight at the debate? No. In fact, Carney has been asked, and this has been brought up, and has always been dismissed as conspiracies, and has refused to answer it. Absolutely refused to touch it. Of course, I would too if I was Carney running for that and I'd been hanging around with a child predator. I wouldn't want to discuss it at all. Keep that out. I can't say a word on that. They're going to use that sound clip. Another thing they're not going to talk about tonight are how MPs get an automatic pay increase every year on April 1st. Yes, April Fools. Also, the Royal Canadian Air Force birthday, April 1st. MPs get an automatic pay increase, regardless of how well they've done the job, regardless of whether or not they've even attempted to balance the budget, whether or not they've even outspent or performed in scandals or done anything illegal. Absolutely no responsibilities. We will just keep paying them while they keep making decisions and making us poor every single year. There needs to be another way. And Liberal Party scandals. Are they going to talk about the scandals at all? It's not so much the list of scandals, but it's also everything else in Parliament that has been going on that they have not been dealing with, not touched at all. Most Canadians have no idea that the government has not been performing any business in Parliament since June of last year when the Speaker ordered the Liberals to produce documents that they have refused to hand over because we know those documents will prove their criminal involvement in lining their own pockets and the pockets of their friends through contracts, through the supply and management of our money. So let's get into the scandals, shall we? We'll do a quick list. These are the ongoing scandals that we all knew along the Yukon vacation. Now, of course, this had to do with Prime Minister Trudeau, which is why they changed leaders just before the election, because they're trying to make all this stuff disappear. But don't forget that the reason that this happened, the reason that Justin Trudeau abused his position and ended up in all these scandals is because that is who the Liberals are. It's not just him. It's every other liberal. They have no ethical or moral compunctions about violating these ethics or stealing from Canadians or doing things that are immoral or illegal as long as it lines their pockets because they have no consequences at all for what they do. Outcome: Canada's Ethics Commissioner ruled Trudeau breached ethics rules, marking the first time a sitting prime minister was found guilty of such a violation. Trudeau apologizes but faced no legal consequences. That should be the Liberal story till the end of time. No consequences. SNC-Lavalin affair, right? Well, now, of course, Lavalin has changed its name so they can get a contract with a high-speed rail project in Canada. The Liberals want to spend billions on. That's right. Trudeau and his team were accused of pressuring then Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould, another woman that Justin abused, to offer a deferred prosecution agreement to SNC-Lavalin, but she refused. Right? She says this is unethical. So the ethics commissioner found Trudeau guilty of breaching ethics rules again. Right? Judy Wilson-Raybould resigned from cabinet, and the scandal damaged Trudeau's reputation, but obviously not much because he got elected again. No consequences. Blackface controversy. You know, if I ever do get my certificate from the wing for having completed 38 years of service to this country, because it's signed by this blackface clown. And if I have to hang it up on my wall, I'm definitely going to get a little picture of blackface clown there and hang it right next to the certificate so that everybody knows that that signature that I have on my certificate was signed by this blackface clown. Outcome? Well, Trudeau apologized, acknowledging his behavior, but he did it so often he doesn't even remember how many times he did it. So this is the kind of upbringing that this person had with no ethics, no morals, that it was perfectly acceptable to keep running around doing blackface for a gag. Well, arrived can controversy. Oh my God, the COVIDity, stupidity, abused in so many ways. And people were fined thousands of dollars for not using this app. They were going after uh, farmers, Mennonites using this thing. Or what's the other group? The Amish. The Amish don't use technology. They show up at the border. They get sent a fine. They have no idea what it's about, what's going on. And of course they got defended. But this is typical liberal stupidity. All they want to do is just steal more money from us and control us in every single way. Now, of course, this arrive can controversy was that once again, they assign contracts with no oversight. People are stealing all kinds of money from this, and then they end up using a small portion of it to actually create the program and then pocket the rest and call it a success. And the liberals say, well, that's the cost of doing business. No consequences. The Green Slush Fund. The Auditor General found Sustainable Development Technologies awarded $400 million to projects with conflicts of interest, including funds to companies linked to Liberal appointees. These are the documents that the Liberals won't hand over that the Speaker ordered them to. Regardless, the RCMP is still investigating, but the Liberal government has been accused of obstructing access to documents. That's right, they won't hand the documents over. Well, I guess that's you can get away with crimes, right? You just hide all the proof as long as you're in government. And that is why they are so desperately trying to hang on because they know once they are out, these investigations are going to go through and hopefully we will get some results. But I'm not hanging my hat on that because, in my experience of 50 years following politics in Canada, as each successive government comes in, they find what the government did wrong and then never go after the people that violated their oath or stole from Canadians. I don't expect anything to happen again. Know them by what they do. They didn't do it last time under Harper. I highly doubt they would do it this time under Poilievre if he forms government. Foreign interference allegations. Well, they're still going on today, even on the campaign trail. The Chinese Communist Party infiltration of the Liberal Party is incredible. Reports primarily from CSIS leaks allege that some Liberal MPs have collaborated with foreign governments, particularly China, to influence Canadian elections. The government was accused of ignoring warnings about interference. Accused. We know. We accused. We could see it. We could see they're ignoring it. They had a CPP operative, ex-cop, as a Liberal candidate in Toronto. He removed himself after he thought it was a good idea to joke about having his opponent kidnapped and then sent to a Chinese Communist Party affiliated building so he could be whisked away back to China. We'll see how an ex-cop could think that making jokes about abduction is a fine thing to do. But then they replaced him with another CCP operative. Outcome. The government has resisted releasing full reports citing national security. Well, there's no national security here. The only security here is their own ass covering. No specific MPs have been publicly named or charged. It's because they won't release the documents. Well, that's not true. People have been naming and shaming, but of course, in most cases, the news just won't even cover that basic stuff. India trip controversy. Trudeau's family faced criticism for wearing elaborate costumes right out of his tickle trunk. During an official trip to India, the trip was further marred by the invitation of Jespel Etwal, a convicted attempted murderer, to a reception. Yeah, this clown that's been the head puppet of the leader of the Liberal Party since 2015. He was a complete joke. Outcome: Trudeau faced public mockery and apologized. No legal or ethical violations were confirmed, but the trip damaged his international image. I think it was about that time that internationally, Canada officially became a joke, with Trudeau running around in costumes everywhere he went, virtue signaling, culturally appropriating, and then pointing fingers at everyone else if it was culturally appropriated. Such a hypocrite. Groping allegations. Well, we all remember that story. I'm just going to say one thing. People are experiencing things differently. Ethics violations by other Liberal ministers. Oh my God. So there's really no sense in going through all these different ministers. Yesterday's video went back through the letter submitted by the two detectives with plenty of evidence. And the caucus members that they're talking about here, the evidence is there. We all know they're corrupt. We all know they're dirty. It's strange because, most of them had dropped out when their polls were so low when Trudeau was still in charge, part of the election being called, saying, oh, I'm not going to run again. Then as soon as Carney came back in, the fake polls started pumping up the numbers, and he goes, oh my God, I think I have a chance. I think I have a chance. Maybe I don't need to leave the country after all the money I've stolen and all the crimes I've done. Maybe I can stay another 5 years, so let's run again. I swear. I don't think we're going to find a lot of these former Liberal ministers living in Canada much longer after this elections if they don't get their seats. That's just something I'm thinking that might be happening. Not saying it will. We'll see. Well, let's finish off by going back to our daily look through. Blazing Catford. Well, what's he covering today? Liberal spending on climate change has been a $200 billion disaster, and that's $200 billion that they printed and spent. That's right. Plus making our lives miserable. For what? Because apparently, um, according to the United Nations, right, climate change is something that is human caused. In fact, if you look at videos that deal or discuss anything to do with climate on CommieTube, they will always put a little disclaimer on there and then repeat the same words from the UN regarding climate, that it is caused by humans. Even though we orbit a giant ball of plasma, that if it was the size of my fist, planet Earth would barely be the size of a pinhead next to it. And somehow the tiny little humans on this tiny little ball of dirt are going to affect how this big giant ball of plasma is going to keep this little ball warm. Which, by the way, this ball of plasma cools more often than it stays warm because geologically, on this planet, we know that we've been through more ice ages than we've been through warm periods. So, you want to prevaricate about global warming, human caused climate change, that's all right. But then as soon as winter comes along, why aren't you talking about it then? That's right. Because the earth is warmed by the sun. And no amount of human activity is going to change that. Unless, of course, we, do atomic bombs all over the planet, then who's going to care? Because it will all be irradiated and dead anyway. We should be more worried about the volcanoes going off and blocking out the sunlight for 2 years, like happened in the 1800s for a couple of summers where they couldn't grow any food. You know, that's what we really need to worry about, not about heating and warming. Trump administration threatens Harvard with foreign student ban. Ah, yes. So Harvard's been used lately because they haven't been using their federal funding properly. In fact, they do have some racist policies at Harvard where certain people are more equal than others when it comes to admission. Of course, they will never admit that. Race-based sentencings put significance on who done it. That's right. So in Canada, if you're native, you will get a reduced sentence because in Canada, as what's happened under, far left influence law changes, is that some people will always be more equal than others. That's how the far left works. That's how liberals work. Somebody always needs to be the lesser man so that they can create a crisis, so that they can get people to hate each other, so that they can step in and keep all of you people who are fighting against each other distracted while they steal your money. Scientists find strong evidence yet of life on alien planets. I just wish we could find some intelligence life in Parliament. Polyev plan to impose true life sentences, a legitimate use of notwithstanding clause. Ah, yes. Well, there's been a lot of pearl clutching when it comes to the notwithstanding clause by the liberals. So I think we'll just end by repeating what I've shown in a prior video, is that the liberals themselves have used the notwithstanding, not so much notwithstanding clause, but they've used notwithstanding to coerce Canadian Armed Forces soldiers into an experimental jibby jab. And then once they got injured and dead, they decided that it wasn't work related and that they're not entitled to any support, any health care, any duty of care that the armed forces should provide, or Veterans Affairs when they kick them out because, now they're injured and they can't be a soldier anymore. And Veterans Affairs will also look at them and say, oh, no, 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 that's not work related. You don't get any duty of care from us either. Off to a vaccine injury support program, which of course Canadian Forces members at that point can't access because it's been over 3 years for them. So we want to talk about notwithstanding. Let's look at it again. Here's here's the CDS Directive 002. First one that came out in 2021 that coerced Canadian Armed Forces soldiers into taking the jibby jab. Notwithstanding DOAD 5019-4 declaring minimum monitoring periods, which were waived. These minimum monitoring periods that Canadian Forces soldiers had to go through could have been at least 9 months. And during that 9 months, who knows, they might have even changed the policy and realized, oh my good, we're going to lose all these people. Maybe we shouldn't remove 10% of our Canadian Armed Forces, all our trained personnel. Let's not do that. But they did that anyway, right? Notwithstanding. And then as a result, like I said, notwithstanding, what happened? Well, you harmed them, you injured them, you unalived a few of them, and now you've just thrown them and their families away. That's the legacy of the Liberal Party. And I think that is the largest scandal of all, is the fact that they have unalived people and nobody cares. They have permanently injured people, making them incapable of working for the rest of their lives, and nobody cares. This should be the biggest story. This should be the biggest story and the number one thing that they're talking about at the debates tonight, but they will not. This has been Occam's Razor. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks for hanging out. Talk to you later.